What is up, guys, and welcome back to Foundations of Faith, and welcome back to the On the Mountaintop series. As you can see, different location. We got some events going on, so we had to change up locations. But it doesn't change the fact that Jesus is still speaking. So on the second episode of the On the Mountaintop series of us going through the Sermon on the Mount, we're going to be talking about salt and light, okay? So Jesus tells us to be the salt and the light, okay? But what are the purposes of salt and light? So the dictionary, or the just overall consensus purposes for salt, it makes things taste better. You know, it adds flavor to it, but also it is a preservative. So it preserves stuff that, like meat back in the day, it preserves it to make it to where it doesn't go bad. Now light, it provides assistance to seeing in the dark. It provides assistance to being able to see stuff that we can't normally see whenever we're in the dark like that. Now, what they have in common is that they are both additives that improve something in our lives. They're both additives that make it easier to do something in our day-to-day lives. Now, as followers of Christ, we hold the same purpose as salt and light. You know, we are the salt and the light that Jesus is called. We are the salt and the light that Jesus uses to improve the world. So here we go. Salt and life changes our lives. It's pretty simple. You know, it changes how we view our lives. When we are the salt of the earth, when we are the light of the world, we hold new value. We hold a different value than what we are without that. Now, salt and light were two of the most valuable commodities back in Jesus' day. So, like I said, salt preserved. It preserved things that normally would just spoil. So you had that. That's huge. You know, they didn't have refrigerators back in the day. So it's a whole different story and a whole different game whenever you had salt back in the day. And light, obviously, they didn't have electricity, so they didn't always have a broadcast of light coming at them. They had the sun. So when we're the light of the earth, we have value. When we're salt, we have value. With that being said, let's look at exactly what Jesus says about us being the salt and the light. And that's going to be in Matthew 5:13 through 16 if you want to follow along. And it says, "You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good works and give glory to the Father who is in heaven." So what does salt do, and why are we compared to it? Well, we already touched on that. It preserves, it adds flavor, it seasons. But I want to emphasize the preserves portion for this. Salt has been used as a preservation method for centuries, for thousands of years. When we are the salt of the earth, we are preserving the kingdom of God. We are preserving the righteousness of Jesus because we are the salt of the earth, and that's what we're called to be. That's why it's so important to remain salty. And I'm not saying salty like, oh, they did something wrong, I'm salty about it. I'm saying remain salty in that you're holding Jesus' righteousness in your heart, that you're holding it close to you, because salt has a significant purpose. Salt is referenced in the Bible more than just in Matthew 5, okay? In Numbers 18:19, it said that there's a covenant of salt, and it's everlasting. And that covenant is everlasting because of the preservation that salt generates. And if we're holding on to the righteousness of God, if we're holding on, if we're being salty, we're preserving it. We're preserving the righteousness of God. The righteousness is everlasting, and the gospel is everlasting. And that's what you need to realize when we're called to be salt of the earth. We're not called to just be this preservation method of the ways of the world. We're called to be a preservation method of the ways of Jesus and the righteousness of Jesus. And honestly, that's kind of hard to understand. I get it. It was hard for me to understand just reading this. But once you understand that the covenant is everlasting, once you apply that Numbers 18 verse to it, or rather you apply the Matthew to the Numbers, you see that the covenant of Jesus is everlasting because of the saltiness of us. We are the kingdom, and we are to remain salty so that he remains righteous. And we demonstrate that righteousness through that and through being salty. Now, as Christians, we're called to hold our saltiness so we can broadcast Christ's righteousness. And that's one of those important things. Write it down right now. If you're listening to this, write it down. We have to broadcast Christ's righteousness, and that comes through holding on to our saltiness. We have to hold on to the promises that Jesus has made. We have to hold on to the work that he has done in our lives, because that is where our saltiness and our flavor comes from. It's from Jesus. We are the preservation of his word. We are the preservation of who he is. What we preserve from the book and from what he has done in our lives is what comes out. What we preserve is what comes out. Our actions, our words, everything, etc. That's what comes out. So how salty are you? What happens when we lose our salt or our taste? Well, you see, when salt loses its taste, it's rendered useless. You lose its savor. When salt loses its taste, it loses its savor. And our savor for the righteousness of Jesus and our preservation of the righteousness of Jesus disappears when we lose our saltiness, when we lose our taste. That is what he is saying when he says, if it's lost its taste, how shall saltiness be restored? It can't. It can't. You see, we are rendered useless for the kingdom when we have lost our salt. For context, salt that had no taste back in the day, it was literally used to lay on footpaths. It was used to be trampled on. That's what it was. It was a preservative after all, but it wasn't preserving the savoriness of what it was supposed to. And that's crucial to understand. You see, they were trampled on by the feet of men, but if we fail to keep our salt, if we fail to keep the saltiness that Jesus has provided us with, then we will be trampled by the feet of men. We will be trampled by the world. We will no longer be preserving the righteousness of God, but we will be preserving the righteousness of man, and man will stomp on you faster than you can even say stop. And that's one thing to understand, is that Jesus will never stomp all over you like man will. It's a man eats man world down here. That's one thing to understand when it comes to saltiness, is that if you lose your salt, if you lose your walk with Jesus, you're not going to do well. You're going to get trampled by the ways of the world, by the people of the world, and that's no way to live. So that's why we have to stay salty. If we're not holding on to the righteousness of God, we're not preserving that in our lives, which means our testimony is useless when speaking to man, because they see that you're not holding on to that salt. You're not holding on to the righteousness of Jesus, but you're claiming to be. Therefore, your testimony is rendered useless. They see your undedication, your hypocrisy, and they render you a false interpretation of the saltiness that you're claiming to have. You see, they see you've lost your taste. You've lost your taste. And we cannot lose our taste. We have to preserve the righteousness. So moving on from salt, what does it mean to be the light of the world? You see, Jesus declared himself the light of the world in John 8. So after that, well, depending on how you view it, but Jesus declared himself the light of the world in John 8. But we cannot be Jesus, obviously. If that wasn't obvious enough, I mean, that leaves questions, right? Like, that leaves questions like, how are we supposed to be the light of the world if Jesus is the light of the world? Well, you see, Jesus is the source of the light. Think of it like the sun. You know, we still have light here on earth, right? But all of the light generated comes from the sun. So the sun radiates light. It radiates light around the whole entire solar system, provides heat. provides heat so that we can live. Just like that, Jesus radiates the light into us. He radiates the light into our lives when we follow him. You see, we are the reflection of his light. We are the reflection of who he is. We are the reflection of what he has done in our lives. His light is what's supposed to be broadcasted to the entire world. We are just the vessels by which it travels. We are just the vessels by which it travels. Let that sink in. We are the city on the hill. We shine and we stand out when we have the light of Jesus. You see, we can't be the sun, but we can for sure be something that radiates its light. As we've discussed, we're different when we're following Jesus. We broadcast the fruits of Jesus when we're following Jesus. If we're representing Christ, then the light cannot be hidden. The light, it has to be displayed. It becomes that light that shines when people see you. That light is what shines when people sees you, when you are representing Christ. You see, what Jesus says here, a city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand. We do not hide our light. You see, like I said, people do not have lamps to hide the light emitted from it. We do not have these lamps right here to hide the light. We use it to shine. We use it to broadcast the area around. They have to have that light of those lamps. If you're in a dark room and you're sitting there and you turn on a lamp, that lamp illuminates the entire room. It illuminates the entire room. We cannot hide that light that Jesus has given us. We cannot hide the light that Jesus has poured into us. We have to let it shine. We have to be the city on a hill. We have to be the lamp on a stand. We have to broadcast that light to everyone in our vicinity. You see, I like to think of it as like a lighthouse. We have to be a lighthouse for those people, for the people of the world, for the people who don't know Jesus. We have to be a lighthouse. A lighthouse signals that it is there, but it's also a destination marker. If you think about it in terms of like off the coast of North Carolina, there's many, many, many lighthouses to prevent ships from running ashore. And it's guiding them away from danger. When we're a city on a hill, when we're a lamp on a stand, and we're broadcasting the light of Jesus, we're a lighthouse. We're keeping people away from danger, and we're illuminating their lives. We're illuminating the safe way. It indicates safety. And we're supposed to be lighthouses for humanity. We should shine our light as bright as possible. And that's our light is seen through our works. Our light is seen through our works. And that how bright your light shines is how just the works work. It's that simple. Our work should glorify God, and our light shines brighter when we are glorifying God. So to wrap this up, are you salty? Are you preserving the righteousness of God and the value that God has given to you? Or are you setting yourself up to be trampled on by the feet of man? You see, Jesus calls us to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world. We have to keep our saltiness, and we have to broadcast our light for everyone to see. We have to preserve the righteousness of God. We have to be the light of the world. Our light should shine bright enough for all to see. We cannot hide the light that God has given us, because that's when we lose our salt. So in final message to you, be the salt and be the light. Follow what Jesus has planned for you and follow what Jesus has called us to do. Thank you guys for listening and watching. I appreciate y'all. Go check out the new merch drop for the On the Mountaintop series in the link in the description and in the channel description. I hope y'all all see next week, and just be praying. Be praying to be the salt and the light of the world. Thank you guys for listening and watching. Peace out, guys.